Chapter 7, Happy Hour at the Hotel Deucalion. You may notice the light changing over the course of this video. It's because I've filmed it over several hours coming and going, and it's gotten dark outside. I can't control that, it's nature. Happy Hour at the Hotel Deucalion. Essentially, this is the grand tour. Morrigan has woken up in the hotel room that she is now living in, her bedroom, room 85. She's a little bit disappointed at first because compared to the extravagance of this incredible, beautiful hotel, it's a little boring. It's a little wooden bed and some white walls and a little square window. But when she goes to see Jupiter, he's left her a note saying, "Come and see me in my study." And he explains, "Listen, your room's a little bit boring at the moment, but don't worry, it'll get to know you. Things will change," which makes no sense to Morrigan, but it will make sense to her later on. So this is the chapter where we meet everyone who lives at the Hotel Deucalion. Well, not everyone, but all of the important players. So the residents, the staff that live and work there, the people we will grow to love. First of all, we don't meet, but we see a photo in Jupiter's office of Jupiter and his nephew Jack, who is a teenager. He's just a little bit older than Morrigan, maybe 1 or 2 years. And Jupiter tells Morrigan that he is away at boarding school. He was at the party last night. She did see him at the party, but he's gone straight back to school because, you know, he's a bit of a nerd who does that sort of thing. And Jupiter says that he's hoping Morrigan will be a bad influence on him because he doesn't come home often enough. He's always at school studying. Nothing wrong with that. Stay in school. Next up, we meet Frank. We go to the smoking parlour. Side note, smoking parlour is often cited as people's kind of one of their favourite parts of the Hotel Deucalion. Me too. It was one of the first things that I ever came up with when I was writing these early chapters years and years and years ago. And it was inspired by the work of a British fashion photographer called Tim Walker, who you may or may not have heard of, but have a little Google. He does the most incredible kind of fairy tale like fashion photography shoots, and he had this series where they were in like beautiful ballrooms and manor homes, and they used a lot of like big plumes of colourful smoke in these photos, and I just thought they were so magical, and I drew a lot of inspiration from his work, and that's how I created the smoking parlour. The smoking parlour is not a room where people go to smoke, ew. It's a room where the walls emit clouds of like scented and colourful smoke just for relaxation purposes. It's aromatherapy, like, that's what it is. So we go to the smoking parlour and we meet Frank the vampire dwarf, who is the resident party planner. He is a vampire and he is curious about Morrigan, especially when Jupiter says, "This is my candidate for the Wondrous Society." This seems to shock Frank, and he tries to ask something, but Jupiter cuts it short. He's like, "Conversation over, see ya, Frank." This is where the tour is cut short as well, and this is something that we will come to experience a lot with Jupiter, because Jupiter North he has a lot of fingers in a lot of pies. He is a very beloved, respected figure in Nevermoor, and a lot of people know who he is, and he's often getting called on for advice or for help with something, or to attend a big event or whatever. And so it does become a bit of a recurring, slightly frustrating theme that, you know, there are a lot of people who need Jupiter, and it's not just Morrigan, and he's often called away at the most inopportune moments, starting with this one. Charlie McAllister, who works at the hotel, he is the chauffeur, fleet manager, transport manager. He comes and says, "Captain North, has been a message. The Nevermoor Transport Authority need your help. There's been another accident on the Wonderground. A train has derailed," and he's a bit worried and nervous about this, and a lot of people are worried and nervous. And he says, "They're saying that it could be because of the Wundersmith," and Morrigan's never heard this before, and she says, "What's the Wundersmith?" And it all kind of gets brushed away, you know, don't worry. Jupiter's not worried. He's like, "I don't think it's the Wundersmith." He calls the Wundersmith fairy tale and superstition. He doesn't think that there has been an accident because the Wonderground is propelled by wonder. Wonder doesn't have accidents. But nonetheless, he goes and he cuts the tour short, and he hands Morrigan over to Martha, who finishes the tour by introducing her to Dame Chanda, who is the resident soprano at there. She's an opera singer who lives at the hotel. And Dame Chanda is also a member of the Wondrous Society, and she's very curious about Morrigan and about what her knack might be. Dame Chanda herself is a Grand High Soprano and Dame Commander of the Order of Woodland Whisperers. And what that means is that when she sings, her voice attracts woodland animals, little squirrels and fairy wrens and weasels and all sorts of things flock to her at the sound of her beautiful voice. And Morrigan is very impressed by this beautiful, stately, interesting woman. And Dame Chanda says, basically asks her, what is Jupiter giving you to wear to the wondrous welcome? And this is the first Morrigan's hearing about the wondrous welcome. And this is how Dame Chanda describes it to her. The wondrous welcome isn't just a garden party, Miss Morrigan. It is, most unfortunately, a garden full of people judging everything about you. The other candidates and patrons will be sizing you up as their competition. It is very intense. So the wondrous welcome is a garden party held at the campus of the Wondrous Society, which Morrigan will be competing to get into. And already she's terrified because she was not told about a garden of judgment before she agreed to do this. But Dame Chanda says, don't worry about it, you'll be fine. We're all dying to know what your knack is. Again, there are so many things that Morrigan is like, what's that? What's that? I haven't heard about this. Jupiter hasn't done a great job of filling her in so far. To be fair, it's been less than 24 hours. But she says your knack, your little skill, your extraordinary talent that's going to get you into the Wondrous Society. And Morrigan's stomach just drops because this is the first she's heard of it. She didn't know she had to attend a garden party of judgment. She didn't know she had to have an extraordinary talent to get her in. She doesn't have one. And now she's worried and she's stressed. And she says to Martha, I don't have a talent. And Martha is just not worried because she says, of course you have a talent. You're a candidate for the Wondrous Society. You're Jupiter North's candidate. And he has never taken a candidate before. They're all supposed to, by a certain age. If you're a member of the Wondrous Society, you should be bringing more young blood into the Wondrous Society. So by a certain age, if you haven't put forward a candidate, people kind of will look strangely at that. And so Martha's so confident that she must have an incredible knack. And Jupiter knows about it, but maybe Morrigan doesn't. And Morrigan's like, no, I don't. But it occurs to her, there is something special about me. I'm cursed. I'm a cursed child. Is that my knack? Is that my talent? Just making things go wrong? And of course that idea horrifies her because she doesn't want to be known for that. She's never wanted to be known for that. And she thought that she'd escaped all of that by coming to Nevermoor. So she's hoping that it doesn't turn out to be her big secret talent. As they're having this conversation, there's a great big crash and they go down to the lobby to see that the beautiful pink sailing ship chandelier that Morrigan had so admired when she arrived, it has just fallen out of the ceiling and crashed down to the floor. And Kedri says, we're really lucky that didn't hit anyone. What an extraordinary stroke of luck. And Morrigan thinks, I don't think it is good luck. I think it's bad luck. And I think it's the bad luck that I brought with me because I'm cursed. And so she goes to bed quite worried about that. And that's the end of chapter 7. Okay, we're up to chapter 8, and it is called Interesting, Useful, Good. Now, Morrigan wakes up in the middle of the night and she's immediately anxious because she can't stop thinking about that chandelier and wondering if it was somehow her fault, even though logically she doesn't see how it could be. She works herself up into such a tiz that finally she just has to go downstairs to the lobby and investigate for herself. She wants to take a look. Maybe there's some faulty wiring or something and that will just set her mind at ease. So she goes down to the lobby. Everything's dark. It's just before sunrise. The check-in desk is closed. There's no staff around, but she's not alone. She hears a faint humming sound and she thinks it's a song that she recognizes. And so she calls out, who's there? And the person says, don't be afraid. My train was late. I missed the last check-in. I'm just waiting until the check-in desk opens in the morning. And this person comes out of the shadows and she sees that it's Mr. Jones, who we met on bid day. And they're both surprised to see each other. Mr. Jones is especially surprised because Morrigan has just been reported as dead in the Wintersea Republic. So it's a pretty big shock for him to see her, in fact, alive and well, and in the Free State of all places. And he asks her about this, and she has this moment of panic of, oh God, how can I tell him? And then she says, hang on, what are you doing in the Free State? And there is a moment of amnesty, I suppose, where he says, yeah, point taken, I'll keep your secret and you keep mine. That's it. Oh, no, sorry, I'm sorry. I missed something important. First of all, he says, my employer's offer still stands. He would, like, if he hears about this, I know that he would still love to have you as his apprentice. And Morrigan's like, well, sorry, but I kind of already have a patron. His name's Jupiter. I'm trying to get into the Wonder Society. And Mr. Jones is very understanding about that. And they talk also about the chandelier, because Morrigan says she's come down to look at the chandelier that fell out of the ceiling that day. And he's surprised when he sees it, and he says, oh, I don't think it fell. Like, and Morrigan instantly feels hopeful, because from that she takes that, like, maybe he thinks it didn't fall, that someone cut the wires or something. Maybe this isn't her fault. Maybe it's not that she brought the curse with her. She says, do you think someone could have done it deliberately? Like, maybe someone cut the wires, or... No, not at all, he says. I think it grew out. She blinked. Grew out. Yes, like a tooth. See that? He pointed, and Morrigan squinted up into the darkness. There, see the little glint of light? It's growing back in, replacing itself with something brand new. She could see it now, a tiny speck of light blooming out of the shadows. She'd missed it before, but there was no mistaking the little thread of crystal and light curling downward from the ceiling. Her heart lifted. Will it look just the same? I shouldn't think so, Mr. Jones said, sounding wistful. I'm no expert on the inner workings of the Hotel Deucalion, but I have been coming here for many years, and I don't believe I've ever seen her wear the same dress twice. So we'll wait and see what the chandelier comes back as. The other thing they discuss here, and by the way, earlier I got something wrong. Morrigan doesn't tell him that she is doing the trials to get into the Wonder Society. He actually guesses. He sort of says, he basically asks her, like, what's your knack? She says, well, I don't know. She admits that she doesn't know. And he says, but in order to get into the Wonder Society, like, your patron does have to know that you've got one. She says, yeah, no, He hasn't told me. And Mr. Jones asks her the very pertinent question, which is, don't you think that's a little bit strange? And she says, yes, I do. Cut to the next morning when Morrigan wakes up, and the first thing that she does is go to her bedroom door, because she's going to storm out and demand to know from Jupiter what her knack is. And luckily enough, he is at her bedroom door with his hand raised to knock as she opens it. And he brings some breakfast. And so they have this conversation, Morrigan and Jupiter, finally, about the Wonder Society and the trials to get in, and what she's facing. She's obviously in a bit of a panic, saying, like, you have got the wrong person here, because I need to have a talent, don't I? I need to have a talent, is what I'm picking up from everyone, to be able to get into the Wonder Society, and I don't have that. And now you know that, and you've clearly got the wrong person. And Jupiter's doing what we come to know as Jupiter's bit that he tends to do, which is kind of trying to dodge the serious conversation and move on to other topics. He talks about how he's got his seamstress coming to fit her for a new wardrobe that morning and blah, blah, blah. But Morrigan is a dog with a bone, and she's like, you're not getting out of this conversation. And she forces the point. He says, fine, we'll talk about boring things. And so he finally explains to her what it is to join the Wonder Society. So the process of going through the trials to join the society, there are 4 trials, and the first 3 change every year. He says the elders like to switch it up. It might be a treasure hunt trial. It might be a speech trial. They got rid of the fright trial years ago, thank goodness, because it was way, way, way too scary. He says, but the 4th trial, that's the one that you're interested in. It's rather dramatically called the show trial. But honestly, it's very straightforward. Same thing every year. Each candidate who's made it through the first 3 trials must stand before the High Council of Elders and show them something. Morrigan frowned. Something? Something interesting and useful and good. Interesting and useful and good. You mean a talent, don't you? She braced herself. They want to see a talent. Jupiter shrugged. A talent, a skill, a unique selling point, whatever you want to call it. We call it a knack. Silly Wonder Society speak, of course. It merely refers to the marvellous and unique gift you possess, which the elders will deem extraordinary enough to grant you a lifelong place in the Free State's most elite and prestigious institution. That's all. He grinned through his ginger beard in what he obviously thought was a charming fashion. And so Morrigan's like, oh, is that all? Okay, well, I don't have that, so... And he sort of starts to talk her around in circles and says, listen, you do, but you don't have to worry about that. You worry about the first 3 trials and leave the show trial to me. And she's like, okay, what if I don't want to do this? What if I've changed my mind? He says, listen, I get it, because it's hard. It's hard being part of the Wonder Society. It's scary. And people think that you kind of get a free ride. It's a very prestigious organization, and the people who have this little golden W pin that everyone in the Wonder Society wears, they get a lot of perks. They get a lot of respect and reserved seats on the underground and all sorts of things. But he says you have to earn that respect every day for the rest of your life if you join the Wonder Society. It's not like a normal school where you'll be done in 5 years. You are a lifelong member, and you are always expected to kind of earn your place over and over and over again. And Morrigan is starting to realize how very unappealing all of this sounds. And Jupiter says, listen, I'm saying the worst bits first. I want you to have the full picture. He says, look, the Wondrous Society is more than just a school. It's a family that will take care of you and provide for you your entire life. Yes, you'll have a brilliant education. You'll have opportunities and connections that people outside the society could never dream of. But much more important than that, you will have your unit. The people who go through these 4 trials with you and come out victorious, they will become your brothers and sisters. People who will have your back until the day you die, who will never turn you away, but will care for you as deeply as you care for them. People who would give their life for yours. Jupiter blinked furiously and rubbed a fist against the side of his face, looking away from her. Morrigan was startled to realize that he was blinking back tears. She'd never known someone could feel so strongly about their friends. Probably because she'd never had a friend. Not a real one. Emmett the stuffed rabbit didn't really count. An instant family, brothers and sisters for life. It made sense to her now. Jupiter carried himself like a king, like he was surrounded by an invisible bubble that protected him from all the bad things in life. He knew there were people in the world, somewhere out there, who loved him, who would always love him, no matter what. That was what he was offering her. Like a bowl of hot, meaty stew to a hungry pauper, he held in his hands the things she most craved. And suddenly Morrigan's hunger burned. She wanted to join the society. She wanted brothers and sisters. She wanted it more than she'd ever wanted anything. How do I win? You just need to trust me. Do you trust me? Jupiter's face was earnest and open. Morrigan nodded without hesitation. Then let me worry about the show trial. I'll tell you when you need to start worrying, I promise. And so this is our introduction to the slightly infuriating side of Jupiter North, where he's not a perfect person. He's not a perfect role model. And one of his kind of troubling aspects of his personality is that he tends to have all of these things going on in his head, and he doesn't always give all of the information that people may want or need, because he kind of takes it on himself to I'm going to have that burden. I'll worry about that. You don't need to think about it. But without really thinking that, when you tell people that, they're probably going to worry about it no matter what. And that's exactly what Morrigan does, because she's a bit of a worrywart. And she does ask him here, she outright asks him, is my talent being cursed? Do I have a knack for making things go wrong? And he says, look, I'm going to answer your question in normal roundabout Jupiter way. He says, I am going to answer your question, but first I want to tell you about my knack. And he explains to her that he is a witness with a capital W. And being a witness means that he can see things that other people can't. And she's like, what, like secrets? He says, sometimes. And she says, the future? And he says, no, I'm not a fortune teller. I'm a witness. That's the name for it. I don't see the way things will be. I see the way things are. And Morrigan very rightly says, don't we all? He's like, no, you'd be surprised. And he picks up a teapot and he has her describe it to him. And she describes all of the physical attributes of this teapot, that it's green, it's got a pattern on it, and it's, there's a chip on it, and blah blah blah. And he's like, yeah, pretty good, not bad for a rookie. Let me tell you what I see. And then he tells this whole history of this teapot, that it was made in a factory in Dusty Junction, and he can see the factory kind of oozing out of it, and its first owner bought it 77 years ago from a tea shop in Nevermoor's Market District. And those early years have kind of faded a little bit, but it remembers the factory and it remembers the lady in the market district. And Morrigan's confused because how can a teapot remember anything? He says it's not a memory like yours or mine. It's more like, how shall I put this? There are Events and moments in the past that attach themselves to people and things and cling to them through time simply because they have nowhere else to go. Maybe they eventually fade or get torn away or just die, but some things never die. The especially good memories or the especially bad ones can hang around forever. This teapot has soaked in some good memories. The old lady who owned it made tea every afternoon when her sister came to visit. They loved each other very much, the lady and her sister, and that sort of thing rarely fades away completely. And Morrigan's kind of skeptical of this because she's like, I don't know where this teapot came from. You could tell me anything, and like, how am I going to disprove it? And he says, yeah, excellent point. So let me tell you about you. And then he proceeds to give her her own history. He tells her the things that he can see around her that he would have no way of knowing. Stories from her past, things that she'd done as a kid that he found really funny. And he sees this moment where her stepmother gave her this terrible asymmetrical pixie haircut that she absolutely hated it. And so in revenge, Morrigan, who we learn does have a slight vengeful streak, she cut up her stepmother's dresses and stitched them together and hung them up as curtains. And Jupiter finds that hilarious and says that was brilliant. And she says, okay, fine, I believe you. You clearly see things. And he says, this is an important moment for Morrigan and Jupiter. He says, I see you, Morrigan Crow. He leaned forward, and I'll tell you this, your stepmother was wrong. Wrong about what? Asked Morrigan, but she knew the answer. Her stomach did a little flip. She said you were a curse. Jupiter swallowed and shook his head. She said it in anger. She didn't mean it. Of course she meant it. He paused, considering that. Maybe, but that doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it right. Morrigan felt her face colour and looked away, reaching casually for a pastry from the breakfast tray. She ripped a piece off but didn't eat it. Forget it. You forget it, he said. You forget it from this moment on. Do you understand? You are not a curse. Yeah, okay. Morrigan rolled her eyes and tried to turn away, but Jupiter took her face in his hands and held on fast. No, listen to me. His wide blue eyes burned into her black ones. Righteous anger rolled off him like heat from the pavement in summer. You asked me if your talent is being cursed, if you have a knack for ruining things? Hear me when I tell you this. You are not a curse on anyone, Morrigan Crow. You never have been, and I think you've known that all along. And that's a really important point, is that deep down, Morrigan has known that all along because she's a logical, smart, and emotionally intelligent kid. But that's the first time that anyone has ever told her, you are not a curse, you're not a burden on anyone. So it's a pretty big turning point. And it's also like a really key moment where Morrigan decides, you know, she has already realized that she instinctively trusts this person. And this is where she kind of says, yeah, I'm going to believe you. I'm going to trust you, and we'll see how we go through these trials. But later that day, when Morrigan tried to count all the questions Jupiter had so far avoided answering, she would run out of fingers. I actually think that's a pretty good place to leave it for this week. I was originally planning to read chapters 1 to 9 inclusive, but I think we'll kick off next week with chapter 9, which is called Wondrous Welcome, aka Scary, Intense Garden Party Full of Judgment. That'll be a fun one. Thank you so much for joining me for this first week. If you've gotten to the end, yay! And I hope to see you back next week. Feel free to have a little chat amongst yourselves in the comments below, and I'll chime in where I can. And if you have any questions, let me know. Stay tuned for information about the giveaway that I'm going to be doing later on in the read-along. And also, if you do have any ideas or suggestions about doing a Q&A, I think it'll probably end up being like a YouTube live event, but I'm open to suggestions. Come back next week for the next part of Nevermoor. Bye!